You need to step away from that house right now or I'm calling the police. The woman's voice cut through the quiet suburban street like a sudden crack of thunder on an otherwise calm Saturday afternoon. Marcus Holloway didn't move. He stood beside the black mailbox at the end of the driveway, hands relaxed in the pockets of his charcoal hoodie, his posture calm, almost patient, as if he had heard those exact words before. The neighborhood around him was pristine, the kind of place where lawns were measured in straight lines and sidewalks curved gently beneath tall maple trees, their leaves swaying softly in the warm 72-degree breeze. A silver SUV idled halfway down the street, and somewhere in the distance, a lawn mower hummed steadily, blending into the calm rhythm of the community. Karen Whitmore stood on her porch, arms crossed tightly, her expression locked in suspicion. She looked at Marcus like he didn't belong in the picture, like someone had placed him there by mistake. "I don't know who you are," she said louder this time, stepping down onto the walkway, her sandals clicking against the concrete. "But people don't just stand around houses they don't own." Marcus glanced up at the two-story home in front of him. White siding. Dark shutters. Fresh landscaping. The kind of place designed to look welcoming, but right now, the air felt anything but. He checked his watch slowly, not rushed, not nervous, just deliberate. A few neighbors began to peek through their windows. A curtain shifted. A garage door paused halfway open. The quiet attention of the street began to gather, subtle but unmistakable. Karen pulled out her phone, her movements sharp, decisive. "I'm serious," she said, already dialing. "We've had problems before, and I'm not taking chances." Marcus still didn't move. He leaned slightly against the mailbox, his gaze drifting calmly across the street, as if he were observing something far bigger than the moment itself. The sound of tires rolling slowly over asphalt echoed as a passing sedan slowed down, the driver glancing between Marcus and Karen before continuing on. "Yes, hello," Karen said into the phone, her voice now firm and confident. "There's a suspicious man standing outside a house in our neighborhood. I don't think he lives here." The words hung in the air, heavier than the summer humidity. Marcus exhaled slowly, his expression unchanged. A young couple walking their golden retriever slowed near the sidewalk, their curiosity pulling them closer. The dog's leash tightened as it stopped, tail wagging, unaware of the tension forming around it. Karen glanced at them, then back at Marcus, as if gathering witnesses to justify her certainty. "He's just standing there," she continued into the phone. "Refusing to leave." Marcus tilted his head slightly, watching the sun reflect off the polished windows of the house. The breeze rustled the leaves again, soft and steady, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Somewhere, a front door opened quietly. Another neighbor stepped onto a porch, folding his arms, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Karen lowered her phone slightly, her tone sharpening. "You heard me," she said directly to Marcus. "They're on their way." Marcus nodded once, slow and calm, like someone acknowledging a clock ticking towards something inevitable. He adjusted his sleeve, glanced down the street, and waited as the distant sound of approaching sirens began to echo faintly in the distance, growing closer with every passing second. The faint wail of sirens grew louder as Marcus Holloway remained beside the mailbox, still and composed, as though the moment unfolding around him had already played out in his mind long before this afternoon. Karen Whitmore paced slowly at the edge of her driveway, her phone still in her hand, her confidence growing as the distant police cruiser turned onto the street. The neighborhood, once quiet and predictable, had shifted into something else entirely. Front doors opened. A garage door lifted halfway and stopped. A teenager paused on a bicycle near the corner, watching with curiosity. The golden retriever from earlier now sat calmly beside its owners, its tail tapping lightly against the sidewalk as the couple whispered to each other. Marcus lifted his gaze toward the end of the street where the patrol car rolled closer, sunlight flashing across the windshield. The cruiser slowed as it approached, then pulled to a gentle stop along the curb. The engine idled softly, blending into the afternoon heat. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses as he scanned the scene. His posture was calm, professional, but his eyes moved carefully from Karen to Marcus, then to the growing cluster of neighbors quietly observing. Karen wasted no time. She walked quickly toward the officer, her voice already carrying. "That is him," she said, pointing back toward Marcus. "He has been standing outside that house for 10 minutes. I asked him to leave and he refused." Officer Brooks nodded once, listening without interruption, his expression neutral. He glanced back toward Marcus, who had not moved from the mailbox. Marcus stood with the same calm presence, hands still in his pockets, his shoulders relaxed, as though he had nothing to prove and nowhere else to be. The officer approached slowly, his footsteps measured against the pavement. "Good afternoon, sir," he said evenly. "We received a call about a concern here. Is everything all right?" Marcus met his gaze with quiet confidence. "Everything is fine, officer," he replied calmly. His voice was steady, composed, carrying just enough to reach the nearby neighbors. Karen stepped closer, her tone sharpening. "He does not live here," she insisted. "No one in this neighborhood knows him." The words lingered in the warm air. Officer Brooks turned slightly toward the house, then back to Marcus. "Do you mind telling me what you are doing here today?" Marcus glanced once more at the home in front of him, the sunlight reflecting across the freshly painted trim. "I am just taking a look," he said simply. The answer seemed to unsettle Karen even more. She crossed her arms tightly. "That does not make any sense," she said. "People do not just come here to look." A quiet murmur passed among the neighbors. One man folded his arms. A woman stepped closer to her porch railing. The entire street seemed to lean in, drawn by the tension building without raised voices or sudden movements. Officer Brooks remained calm, his tone still even. "Do you live in the neighborhood, sir?" Marcus shook his head slightly. "Not exactly," he replied. The answer hung in the air, open to interpretation. Karen exhaled sharply, as if the moment confirmed everything she believed. "There," she said, gesturing toward Marcus. "He just admitted it." The officer studied Marcus carefully, noticing the calm posture, the measured breathing, the quiet confidence that did not match the suspicion surrounding him. Marcus glanced down the street again, watching the sunlight stretch across the pavement, then looked back at the officer. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, waiting, as if he understood that the next few minutes would change everything. Karen Whitmore took a small step forward, her voice tightening as the silence stretched across the street. "Officer, I am telling you something is not right," she said, gesturing toward Marcus again. "We have worked hard to keep this neighborhood safe, and people do not just stand outside homes they do not belong to." The phrase hung in the air, heavier now, sharper. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Marcus remained still, his gaze calm, his posture unchanged, as if the rising tension was something he had learned to navigate long ago. Officer Daniel Brooks adjusted his stance slightly, keeping his tone neutral. "Sir, do you have any identification with you?" Marcus nodded once, slow and deliberate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet, moving without hesitation. He handed over his identification quietly, his movements steady, controlled. The officer accepted it, glancing down briefly. Karen leaned forward slightly, trying to read the name before the officer spoke. The breeze lifted the edges of nearby tree leaves, casting moving shadows across the pavement. The street felt quieter now, the distant hum of the lawn mower gone, replaced by the soft sound of footsteps as another neighbor walked closer. Officer Brooks studied the identification carefully, then looked back at Marcus. "Marcus Holloway," he read aloud, his tone even. Karen frowned immediately. "That name does not sound familiar," she said quickly, as if the unfamiliarity confirmed her suspicion. Marcus said nothing. He simply watched, patient, composed. The officer returned his identification, his expression thoughtful. "Do you have business here today, Mr. Holloway?" he asked calmly. Marcus nodded slightly. "Yes," he replied. Karen exhaled sharply, her frustration growing. "Then why will you not just say what you are doing?" she pressed. The couple with the golden retriever exchanged glances. A man near the garage folded his arms tighter. The tension continued to build, quiet but undeniable. Marcus glanced once more at the house, then back at the officer. "I am considering this property," he said simply. Karen shook her head, disbelief written across her face. "Considering?" she repeated. "This home sold months ago. Someone already lives here." Her voice carried confidence, the certainty of someone who believed she knew everything about the street. Marcus tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her statement without reacting. Officer Brooks looked toward the house again, then back at Marcus. "Are you meeting the homeowner?" he asked. Marcus paused for a moment, his calm demeanor unchanged. "In a way," he replied. The answer seemed to confuse Karen even more. She stepped closer, her voice lowering but still firm. "This is exactly what I mean," she said to the officer. "He is being evasive." The neighbors watched closely now. A front door across the street opened wider. A woman stepped out, holding a glass of iced tea, her eyes fixed on the unfolding conversation. Marcus adjusted his sleeve slightly, his expression thoughtful, as though he were weighing something bigger than the moment itself. Officer Brooks remained composed, sensing the tension but refusing to escalate it. "Sir, are you planning to stay here long?" he asked. Marcus shook his head gently. "Not long," he replied. Karen crossed her arms again, her patience thinning. "Then I think it would be best if he left," she said firmly. Marcus met her gaze for the first time directly, calm and steady. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply stood there, as if the entire street was about to learn something they had never expected. The street had grown quieter, but the silence now felt heavier, layered with curiosity and quiet judgment. A woman across the street lifted her phone slightly, pretending to check a message, but her camera lens remained pointed toward Marcus. The couple with the golden retriever moved closer to the curb, their conversation fading into silence as they listened. Karen Whitmore noticed the growing attention and seemed to draw confidence from it, her posture straightening as she addressed Officer Brooks again. "I just do not understand why he will not leave," she said, her voice measured but firm. "If he has no business here, then this is unnecessary." Marcus remained calm, his gaze drifting briefly across the street, noticing the subtle shift in the crowd. A teenage boy leaned against a parked pickup truck, watching with open curiosity. A man watering his lawn had turned off the hose entirely, the water pooling slowly near the curb as he focused on the scene unfolding. Officer Brooks glanced between Karen and Marcus, sensing the tension rising without any raised voices. "Mr. Holloway," he said evenly, "is there someone we can contact to clarify the situation?" Marcus paused for a moment, as if considering the question carefully. Then he reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, like someone who had done this before. Karen watched closely, her expression tightening. "Who are you calling?" she asked, unable to hide her suspicion. Marcus did not answer immediately. He tapped the screen once, then lifted the phone to his ear. The neighborhood remained still, as if waiting for something none of them could yet understand. The golden retriever shifted its weight, tail brushing softly against the pavement. A car drove slowly down the street, then slowed further, the driver glancing at the cluster of people before continuing past. "Hello, Carla," Marcus said calmly into the phone. His tone remained even, controlled. "Yes, I am at Cedar Ridge." The name of the neighborhood seemed to ripple subtly through the crowd. Karen frowned slightly, her arms tightening across her chest. Marcus listened quietly for a moment, then nodded once. "Yes," he continued, "it is happening again." The phrase lingered in the warm air, quiet but meaningful. Officer Brooks tilted his head slightly, watching Marcus more closely now. Karen shifted her weight, her confidence beginning to flicker. "What does that mean?" she asked, though Marcus did not respond. He listened for another moment, then spoke again. "Give me a minute," he said calmly before lowering the phone. The neighbors exchanged glances. The teenage boy leaned forward slightly. The woman with the iced tea stepped down from her porch, her attention fully captured. Karen looked toward Officer Brooks, her voice quieter now but still firm. "I still think he should leave," she said. Officer Brooks did not answer immediately. His eyes remained on Marcus, who stood calmly beside the mailbox, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn. Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket, his expression thoughtful, as though he were waiting for something to arrive that only he could see coming. The breeze shifted again, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass down the street. And in that quiet moment, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath, sensing that whatever came next would change how they saw everything. Karen Whitmore shifted her stance again, her patience wearing thin as the quiet stretched across Cedar Ridge. The growing crowd of neighbors made her more determined, not less. She stepped closer to Marcus, her voice low but sharp. "You called someone, but that does not change anything," she said. "You still do not belong here." The words landed harder this time, and several neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Officer Daniel Brooks noticed the shift immediately, his posture straightening slightly as he watched the tension tighten. Marcus remained composed, his eyes calm, but something in his expression seemed to deepen, as if the moment had crossed an invisible line. A light breeze moved across the street, rustling the American flag hanging from a nearby porch. The teenage boy near the pickup truck leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to happen. Karen folded her arms again, her voice louder now, meant for everyone to hear. "We moved here for peace and safety," she continued. "We know who belongs in this neighborhood." The phrase lingered, heavier than before. A woman holding the glass of iced tea lowered it slowly, her expression tightening. The couple with the golden retriever shifted their weight, their comfort fading. Marcus did not react immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the house once more, the sunlight reflecting off the windows. For a brief moment, his expression softened, and his thoughts drifted elsewhere. 20 years earlier, he had stood on an empty patch of land just beyond the tree line. There had been no sidewalks then, no driveways, no mailboxes. Just open ground stretching nearly 40 acres beneath a wide Texas sky. He remembered the heat rising from the soil, the sound of distant construction equipment, and the blueprint rolled beneath his arm. Back then, people had doubted the vision. They had said no one would invest. They had said no one would move this far outside the city. Marcus had listened quietly then too. He had not argued. He had simply built. The memory faded as he returned to the present, the quiet street now filled with finished homes, trimmed lawns, and neighbors watching him with uncertainty. Karen took another step forward, her voice tightening. "Officer, I think we have been patient enough," she said. "If he has no reason to be here, then he should leave." Officer Brooks hesitated, glancing between Karen and Marcus, sensing the weight of the moment. Marcus inhaled slowly, then spoke for the first time since ending the call. "I do have a reason," he said calmly. His voice carried across the street, steady and controlled. Karen tilted her head, skeptical. "Then say it," she pressed. Marcus looked around the neighborhood, taking in the homes, the sidewalks, the people now watching him closely. The breeze shifted again, carrying the scent of fresh grass and warm pavement. He slipped his hands from his pockets, his posture still relaxed but more grounded now, as if preparing to reveal something long overdue. The neighbors leaned in slightly, their curiosity undeniable. Officer Brooks remained still, waiting. Karen watched him, her certainty beginning to flicker, though she refused to step back. And in that quiet moment, Marcus Holloway finally prepared to speak, knowing that the next words would change how everyone on Cedar Ridge saw him forever. Marcus Holloway looked across the quiet street, his eyes moving slowly from one house to another, as if he were measuring time instead of distance. The neighbors leaned in, waiting. Karen Whitmore crossed her arms tighter, her confidence still holding, though something in her expression began to shift. Officer Daniel Brooks remained calm, sensing the moment had reached a turning point. Marcus finally spoke, his voice steady and measured. "I am here because this place matters to me," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Karen frowned, unimpressed. "That does not explain anything," she replied quickly. Marcus nodded slightly, acknowledging her impatience. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out his phone, his movements deliberate. He tapped once, then lifted it to his ear. The street remained still. The teenage boy near the truck stopped shifting his weight. The couple with the golden retriever stood quietly, their attention fixed. "Carla," Marcus said calmly, "go ahead." He lowered the phone slightly and pressed the speaker button. A clear voice answered from the device. "Yes, Mr. Holloway," the woman replied, professional and composed. The neighbors exchanged glances. Karen tilted her head, her skepticism returning. Marcus spoke again, his tone unchanged. "Can you confirm Cedar Ridge?" There was a brief pause. Then the voice answered clearly. "Cedar Ridge Residential Development, 42 acres, completed in 3 phases over 6 years. Lead developer Marcus Holloway Holdings." The words hung in the air. A faint murmur rippled through the neighbors. Karen blinked once, her expression tightening. Officer Brooks shifted slightly, listening carefully. Marcus remained silent, allowing the moment to settle. Carla continued, her voice steady. Construction began in 2009. Phase 1 included 24 homes. Phase 2 expanded to 43 homes. Phase 3 added the final 12 homes, along with the community park and walking trail. The teenage boy looked down the street toward the small park at the end of the block. The woman with the iced tea lowered her glass slowly. Karen shook her head slightly, as if trying to dismiss what she was hearing. "That does not mean anything," she said, though her voice had softened. Marcus glanced at her calmly, then spoke again into the phone. "And ownership?" he asked. Carla answered without hesitation. "Original land acquisition purchased under Holloway Development Group. Final transfer completed under Cedar Ridge Community Trust, established by Marcus Holloway." The silence that followed felt different now. The breeze moved gently through the trees, but no one spoke. Officer Brooks looked from Marcus to the neighborhood, his expression thoughtful. Marcus slipped the phone back toward his pocket, his gaze steady. Karen looked around at the houses, then back at Marcus, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. The neighbors shifted slightly, their curiosity turning into realization. Marcus stood calmly beside the mailbox, the afternoon sun casting long shadows behind him, as the truth began to settle across Cedar Ridge like a slow-moving tide. The silence settled across Cedar Ridge like a sudden shift in weather, subtle but unmistakable. Karen Whitmore blinked again, her posture stiffening as the weight of Carla's words lingered in the air. The neighbors exchanged quiet glances, their earlier certainty dissolving into curiosity. Officer Daniel Brooks looked toward Marcus Holloway with a new level of attention, his stance no longer neutral but thoughtful. Marcus stood calmly beside the mailbox, his expression steady, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Karen cleared her throat, her voice no longer as confident. "That still does not mean you built this neighborhood," she said, though her tone lacked the sharp edge it once held. Marcus tilted his head slightly, then looked down the street toward the community park at the far end, the walking trail curving behind the trees. "I designed that park," he said quietly. The teenage boy near the pickup truck turned his head toward the park, his eyes widening slightly. Marcus continued, his voice calm and measured. "The trail behind it used to be a drainage ditch. We turned it into a walking path so families could use it." The woman with the iced tea glanced down the street, her expression softening. Karen shifted her weight, her arms loosening slightly at her sides. Marcus looked back toward the houses lining the street. The sidewalks were added in phase 2, he said. Originally, they were not in the plan. The couple with the golden retriever exchanged surprised looks, the dog wagging its tail as if sensing the shift in mood. Officer Brooks nodded slowly, his gaze moving across the neighborhood with new understanding. Marcus slipped his hands back into his pockets, his posture relaxed. When we started, there were no homes here, he added. Just open land and a few old fences. The breeze moved gently through the trees, the leaves rustling softly. Karen looked around at the houses, the manicured lawns, the quiet street she had come to see as permanent. Her expression shifted again, uncertainty replacing certainty. Marcus met her gaze calmly. You asked why I was standing here, he said. This was one of the first lots we finished. The words landed gently, but the meaning settled deeply. A murmur moved through the neighbors. The man who had been watering his lawn stepped closer, his hose forgotten on the grass. The teenage boy straightened, his curiosity turning into quiet respect. Officer Brooks glanced at Karen, then back to Marcus, the shift in power unmistakable. Karen opened her mouth slightly, then closed it again, her confidence slipping away. Marcus remained calm, his voice steady as he added one final sentence. I did not just build a house here, he said. I built this entire community. The street fell completely silent, the weight of the revelation settling across Cedar Ridge as every neighbor looked at Marcus Holloway in a way they never had before. Karen Whitmore felt the shift immediately, like the ground beneath her certainty had quietly moved. She looked around at the houses, the sidewalks, the trees planted evenly along the curb, and for the first time, the neighborhood felt unfamiliar to her. The couple with the golden retriever stepped closer, their expressions no longer guarded but thoughtful. The teenage boy near the pickup truck lowered his arms, his posture changing from curiosity to quiet respect. Officer Daniel Brooks straightened slightly, his tone now softer, more measured. Mr. Holloway, he said, I was not aware. Marcus nodded gently, his expression calm, without pride or anger. Most people are not, he replied quietly. The breeze moved across Cedar Ridge, rustling leaves and shifting shadows along the pavement. The man who had been watering his lawn turned off the hose completely, stepping forward with a hesitant look. You built all of this? He asked, glancing around as if seeing the neighborhood for the first time. Marcus nodded once. Over several years, he answered. The woman with the iced tea lowered her glass slowly, her voice soft. That park at the end of the street, she said, my kids learned to ride their bikes there. Marcus smiled slightly, the first hint of warmth crossing his face. That was the idea, he said calmly. Karen shifted her weight again, her arms no longer crossed. The confidence that had carried her earlier seemed to fade with each passing second. She looked toward the house beside Marcus, then back at him, her voice quieter now. I did not know, she said, almost to herself. The neighbors watched closely, the earlier tension replaced by a different kind of silence, one filled with realization. Officer Brooks glanced toward Karen, then back at Marcus. Everything seems to be in order here, he said gently. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the officer with quiet respect. The teenage boy looked down the street toward the walking trail, his expression thoughtful. The golden retriever wagged its tail, brushing lightly against the sidewalk. The woman with the iced tea stepped forward slightly. Thank you, she said quietly, though she seemed unsure if the words were enough. Marcus looked around the neighborhood, his gaze moving slowly across the homes, the people, the place he had once imagined when there had been nothing but open land. Karen finally met his eyes again, her expression uncertain. Almost apologetic, though she struggled to find the words. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass once more, and the quiet street felt different now, as if the neighborhood itself had shifted in how it saw the man standing beside the mailbox. Marcus adjusted his sleeve calmly, the sunlight stretching across the pavement, as the realization settled fully across Cedar Ridge and the balance of the moment quietly turned. Marcus Holloway looked across Cedar Ridge one last time, his eyes moving slowly from one familiar detail to another, the trimmed hedges, the freshly painted mailboxes, the quiet curve of the street he had once seen only on paper. The neighbors remained still, their earlier certainty replaced by quiet reflection. Karen Whitmore stood a few feet away, her posture softer now, her expression no longer guarded but thoughtful. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped back toward his patrol car, his presence calm, no longer necessary. The golden retriever shifted beside its owners, its tail wagging gently, as if sensing the tension had dissolved into something quieter. Marcus exhaled slowly, the afternoon sun warming the pavement beneath his feet. He remembered standing on this same ground years earlier, when the land had been uneven and silent, when there had been no sidewalks, no homes, no laughter drifting from open windows. Back then, the vision had lived only in blueprints and quiet determination. Now it stood around him, complete, lived in, real. The woman with the iced tea glanced down the street, her voice soft. "You gave families a place to start," she said quietly. Marcus nodded gently, his expression calm. "That was always the goal," he replied. The teenage boy looked toward the walking trail again, his curiosity replaced by respect. The man who had been watering his lawn stepped closer, his tone sincere. "I did not know who you were," he admitted. Marcus offered a small smile. "You were not supposed to," he said calmly. Karen finally spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I should not have assumed," she said, her words careful, almost hesitant. Marcus met her gaze, his expression steady but not harsh. "Assumptions happen," he replied. "But communities grow when people learn from them." The breeze moved gently through the trees again, the leaves rustling softly above the quiet street. Officer Brooks nodded respectfully before stepping into his patrol car, the engine starting with a low hum. The neighbors slowly relaxed, the cluster beginning to loosen as the moment settled into memory. Marcus slipped his hands into his pockets, his posture relaxed once more. He took one final look down the street, the sunlight stretching across the sidewalks, the homes standing quietly under the afternoon sky. "I built this place so people could feel at home," he said calmly, his voice carrying softly across Cedar Ridge. "Everyone deserves that." The words lingered in the warm air, simple but lasting. Karen nodded slightly, her expression thoughtful. The couple with the golden retriever stepped back toward their walk, their conversation quieter now. The teenage boy pushed away from the pickup truck, glancing once more at Marcus before heading down the sidewalk. Marcus turned gently, stepping away from the mailbox, his pace unhurried. The neighborhood watched him for a moment longer, the realization settling fully as he walked down the street he had once imagined from an empty field. And as he disappeared past the curve of Cedar Ridge, the quiet community stood a little different than before, not because anything had changed physically, but because everyone understood, for the first time, who had built the place they now called home.